Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to sit for just a couple of seconds and let people come on and join. So thank you again for joining us. I'd like to introduce Dave Younge. He's the owner and manager of Progressive Stamping and Fabrication and a founding partner of Flexibility Concepts. He's going to join us today on our Entrepreneur Close-Up. He has worked as a youth counselor, a restaurant manager, a salesperson for management services, and point of sales computer installer. So he has a wide range of experiences to share with us. Flexibility Concepts sells FlexiTrack and related products. We'll talk about that. But in general, FlexiTrack makes the framing of curved structures easier, stronger, and more accurate. It's a really cool product. Progressive Stamping and Fabrication is a contract manufacturer making primarily metal parts as components for other manufacturers' products, namely FlexiTrack. Dave presently oversees finance, human resources, sales, and marketing for the company. He also serves on the District Export Council with the U.S. Department of Commerce as president of the Central Oklahoma Manufacturers Association and on the advisory board for Capitol Hill High School in Oklahoma City. And lastly, he's a member of the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance Workforce Committee to develop the 8 demand career pathways, which we'll talk about that too. So Dave, welcome. I made you sound look really great.
No, I just do a lot of stuff. Not very well, but do a lot. But anyway.
That's okay. Why don't you tell us about FlexiTrack and Progressive Stamping?
Yeah, how that all started would be back in 1995. Um, uh, Frank Wheeler invented the product called FlexiTrack, which is the core product. There's some offshoots of that, variations of it, but that's the core product. And he worked with my son-in-law. They were both in the construction industry, and between the two of them, they decided if they could get some investors together to start a company that we take this product to market. And so I apparently Mark thought enough of me that he'd let his father-in-law be part of the business. In fact, leap forward 25 years, or I guess it's 27 years. Mark and I are pretty much the operational people for the company. The two of us. He runs Progressive Stamping, and I run Flexibility Concepts, and obviously those jobs overlap. But and then Frank works here, but he's kind of our research and development guy. Our other two partners are not in the business. They're partners, but they're not in. They don't have an operational responsibility. But so anyway, we started the company in '95. We didn't start selling product in 1998, and we could spend a lot of time talking about all that. The idea originally was we're going to all keep our jobs, and we were going to license out FlexiTrack after we got a patent on it. And it ended up that didn't work, and so we ended up having to make it ourselves. Well, we didn't have the money to start manufacturing, so we hired companies that are called like job shops or contract manufacturers who do parts for other people. And one of those companies was we had 3 companies, but Progressive Stamping was one of the main ones. And the opportunity came in 2003. The owner of Progressive Stamping wanted to sell, so we bought. Again, there's a lot more involved in it than just that short sentence, but that's what it amounted to. So Progressive Stamping still, over half of its business is doing work for other people. About half of its business is making FlexiTrack products. That's kind of the short version.
Still, that's great. I mean, we talked on the last interview about working with family. So Mark is your son-in-law. Still consider him your family?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about working with family.
And I'll answer the question this way, but a disclaimer up front. There's nothing wrong with our personal relationship, but it's funny working together. We probably work together better at work than we do as a family, family outings. Not that we have problems or conflicts, but it's kind of funny. So, and I think part of it's because we see each other every day at work. Family events, they come and go, and of course, I have to take really good care of Mark because his children have provided 5 of my great grandchildren. So if I want to keep seeing my great grandchildren, I guess I got to make sure that things stay cool with Mark. But anyway,
my dad always says he has to take care of my husband because my husband's going to take care of him in old age.
Well,
That's his motivation for being nice to his son-in-law.
yeah, that reminds me of a funny story. Chelsea is Mark's second daughter, and she's the grandchild that was around the most, that I spent a lot of time with when she was younger. Just kind of the way it works. And anyway, one time I have all granddaughters. I've got five granddaughters. I don't have any grandsons until two of them got married, so now I have grandsons. But and Chelsea's one of those that's been married. But when she was a teenager, she said, "Well, how do you feel about having all these granddaughters?" And I said, "Well, it's pretty good because women will do a better job of taking care of me when I get older." And she said, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "That means you'll have to, feed me and dress me and stuff like that. And, maybe if I lose control of my bowels, you'll have to change my diapers." And she said, "You're going to die." So, anyway, uh, that was kind of funny. So we still chuckle about that from time to time. But
That's
it's just
awesome. Okay, little
evangelism.
rabbit hole. Let's
Yeah, we got way off the topic. It has
right.
nothing to do.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, and I apologize to all those people who are offended by that story. But anyway, uh, again, we like to have fun in our family, so that stuff comes up. But
And that's good, and it probably translates to your work environment too, right?
yeah, there's some yucking in the halls around here.
That's good.
It keeps people like, sometimes it's
Okay,
yelling
so
and
let's
screaming.
talk about how you became an entrepreneur.
Ah,
You talked about how you started FlexiTrack a minute ago, but how did you switch? I think you went from restaurant to manufacturing. So talk about your shift and what made you take the entrepreneurial leap.
well, one of the yeah. All right, so let's get this right. When I was in the restaurant business, I'm running a restaurant, and if you think about it, a restaurant takes raw ingredients, has processes and procedures that you make and assemble food for people. So you're taking raw ingredients and turning it into a product, and there's a process for that. And then you're serving the public, so you have customers. And as a manager, I had profit and loss responsibility. I was a math major in school. I did not take accounting. I want to clarify, it's different than taking accounting, but I was always interested in accounting. In fact, at one time I took an online, well, it was a correspondence course when I took it. It'd be like an online course now in accounting, way back when. And so I was always fascinated by doing accounting. And so P&L responsibility and balance sheets and all those kinds of things, I always understood that and knew how to work with those things. Leaping ahead. So it, it's the advantage of being as old as I am is you have a lot more history to look back over. And quite frankly, I can see from the time I was 18 years old or even younger, God has taken me on a course and prepared me for what He thought my future should be. And so when these opportunities come along, I find myself strangely somewhat prepared for them, even though I didn't anticipate I was going to ever do it. I always kind of wanted to have my own business. In fact, at one time, I almost bought the restaurant that I was working in. They offered it to me, and we were in discussion. But then all of a sudden, I got this salary offer that was extraordinary, and I took it instead. Um, but so I've always wanted to kind of be in business. So when Mark came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to start up this company. Would you like to be involved?" Yeah, of course. I didn't even have to think about it. So again, we thought we were just going to license the product. We weren't really going to build a company that we're going to manufacture. We just thought we were going to sit there and get our mailbox money. And uh, but when we made the decision to going to take the product to market ourselves, that was a little scary, and we had all kinds of difficulties. But and and I've talked to several entrepreneurs that have said this. If I'd have known all the trouble I was going to have to get through and solve, I probably never would have started. So it's kind of somewhat good that you have a little bit of starry eyes and don't pay attention to the fact these are all the things that could go wrong, or these are all the problems you're going to have to solve, because it would scare you. But again, they come one at a time, and you take care of them one at a time, so you get through it. So Mark kind of pulled me into it, but it was an opportunity that felt prepared for and wanted to do. They were more of the technical. This is how the product works, and this is how we need to make it, and all that kind of stuff. I was more of the financial guy because, again, that was my background. I was more the management guy. I was able to pull the team together when we started hiring people. I knew how to do all that, and So that, because I'd done that for so many years. So again, I was prepared without knowing I was being prepared.
Right. That's good. So you referenced that you had some, bumps along the way. What are some of the notable bumps you've had, challenges, and what have you done to overcome them?
Well, right off the bat, the one I remember most is we struggled to find somebody that could make it and make it for a price we thought we could sell it for. And and so just working through that and all the different shops that we went to try to find somebody that could make it. And we went from small shops to huge shops. And we had some people tell us we were nuts, and we had other people tell us it was doable. And we had other people who gave us advice on how to make it more doable and all that kind of thing. And some of that advice was horrible, and some of that advice was very good. Um, the and so just kind of working through all that, because again, even though I knew process and I knew manufacturing in the sense of preparing food, I didn't know anything about making a metal part, other than I knew there had to be a process and there had to be a control process, and there had to be a way of maintaining quality and quality checks. Um, and I knew how to handle the financial part of it. How do we manipulate what little bit of money we had and that kind of thing. Um, but it was very, very discouraging. And finally, we just went out to bid with a couple of locations, and we got a price on a die that we couldn't believe was so cheap, and we went ahead and went with that company. Uh, and they struggled mightily. I thought we were never going to get product. It took them months to build the die so it would work and do it right. But but after that, now we got product. We went to a trade show, major trade show, and we don't have any sales. Nobody's buying anything. Now I lied a little bit. We had a couple of sales in there, but we had all these people come to the trade show. It was an extraordinary experience. We had trade magazines come to us and say, "This is the most exciting product at the show this year. We'd like to do an article on you." And we think, "Oh my gosh!" So we actually went home thinking we can't handle all this business. We're just going to be overwhelmed. And then the phone didn't ring, and you're just like, what's going on? And so you had all these kind of doubts. Are we going to? I still remember the first time we had to do payroll, and we got to make payroll. We didn't have any money, and we'd outsource payroll, and they're going to pull the money out of our account on Wednesday, and on Tuesday we didn't have any money. I went to the mailbox Wednesday morning, hoping that we had a post office box, hoping there'd be money in it. Sure enough, there was a check in there enough to cover payroll. Those were some of those anxious moments, and there were lots of those kinds of situations starting out, and you just one step at a time try to solve those issues, and eventually. So we decided we needed to hire salespeople, independent. We hired independent reps, and once we did that, sales started to flow. Now we had to give them a piece of the action, but that still was okay, because them getting a piece was better than not getting any sales at all. But they had the contacts in the field, and it went from there.
Well, I think salesmen are used to working on commission, though. Anyway, right? That's a standard structure in the industry.
Yeah,
In all
yeah,
industry.
yeah, exactly. In our industry, that was standard. It's changed in our industry now, but again, still, that was the standard back then. And we kind of stumbled into that. One of them called me up. We ran an ad before we went to the trade show. One of them called me up and said, "Hey, I'm going to be at that trade show. I'd like to talk to you about representing the product. This is exciting stuff." So that we realized that was probably a choice for us to make. But that first 2 weeks after, we think we're going to go back home and the phone's going to ring off the wall and we don't have any products to sell and all that kind of stuff. And exactly the opposite happened. So it was.
Well, and that's a good point that I think a lot of small business owners don't necessarily realize is how important sales and marketing really is to getting a business off the ground.
Yeah.
Lots of my clients have referral-based businesses, and referral-based businesses are fantastic. But you have to build that up, and you have to get there, and you kind of have to get there through sales and marketing. A lot of business owners go into a business because they know how to do something, but they don't necessarily know how to run a business or how to market and sell a business. So
I completely agree with that. And in fact, we had several internal debates among the five owners about how much should we spend on marketing, what should that marketing be, and why do we have to keep telling people about the product. But one of the things we kept running into is people go, because we were selling through distribution. So we weren't selling directly to the user, we were selling through a distributor. And the distributor says, nobody ever asked for this. And, of course, I was stupid enough to go, well, it didn't exist before, so why would they ask for it? So, and they didn't really encourage the conversation any. But we eventually learned how to modify that. But uh, yeah. So anyway, it was a struggle to figure out. There was a whole lot of little things that you had to figure out how to do and how you're going to handle them. And then we started having, and then people, then there'd be mistakes. Somebody get the wrong product, and all that kind of stuff.
So did you have to encourage your distributors to sell it, or did your salespeople?
I think what happened is that once our salespeople who knew them and had relationships with them, whereas we didn't necessarily know them, we did have some people call up and say, "Oh, I've been looking for a solution to this. I'll buy 100 pieces right now." We did have that happen. Uh, not right away, but we did have that happen. So the business started to grow. But once we put the salesmen in place who already had relationships with they represented several different product lines. So when they went to these locations and they knew the people who were making the decisions about buying, because that's who they called on when they went there, and said, here's this new product. It was enough new and enough different that people go, that's worth taking a shot on. And so we had a lot of people that would take it um, that way. And then the momentum started to build. But we also figured out early on that all our marketing was aimed at architects and contractors, framing contractors, not at distributors. So the other idea was we're driving people to go to the distributor and ask for it, and that helped too.
Yeah, that's good. So internally, we talked about marketing and sales, but I know that you are a big process and procedures guy, which I am too. So let's talk about, you have made a commitment to continual process improvement internally within your business, and maybe I think in your personal life too as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your philosophies about that.
Yeah, especially in today's age, but which I imagine my grandfather probably said the same thing. But anyway, he complained about teenagers the same way I do, so I guess he probably said the same thing about process improvement. But it hit me early on in my professional life that I had a boss that we were forced to we had to read a book about every 6 months. And when we went to training seminars, we'd discuss that book, and we also discuss the policies and procedures. It was basically we're going through boot camp. But and I got into reading. I didn't like to read in high school, although I read books, but it wasn't something that I had. One topic I read a lot about, which interestingly enough was Native Americans. And here I end up in Oklahoma. But again, that's what I talk about. You get prepared for things that So
Right.
anyway, didn't even know it. But in college, I had taken English literature class. Or had taken a literature class. I took an English literature class, and found out there were some really fascinating books out there. And so I became a bit of a reader, and and not a lot of books, but some books, and found that as I read, it helped me learn. And then when I got into management, how can I be a better manager? How can I train my people better? All that kind of stuff. And of course, working for that employer who was always pushing information and stuff to us. In fact, for years after I quit working for him, I would go on his mailing list and he'd send me articles to read. So he had a heavy influence over my life as far as developing that attitude of continuous learning and continuous improvement. And so the same thing happened in the restaurant. You're always looking at ways for be more efficient, more ways to get it done with less effort, more cutting down the amount of time people had to wait for their food, all that kind of stuff. So that just became part of who I was. And of course, when you get into manufacturing, that's the whole game, because new technologies come along, and being able to adopt those technologies, or you got to continue to raise the level of your employees so that first of all, so they can actually be worth more. It's good for them; they make more money, but it also makes them more valuable to you because there's more things they can do. And so we're a small company. People have got to be able to do multiple things. So we're always doing that. And it's about training. And if you don't train them, then you're stuck with what? Somebody who's not learning and not growing. And I also think you get obsolete real fast. And and then, good grief, it's what keeps you going. If you've got something, if you're learning and you want to contribute, um, being out there and being able to talk to people and engaging with people and affecting people, I find all that fun. And you can't do that if you're not trying to grow yourself. Nobody wants to talk to somebody that's given up and sitting in a rocking chair. There's lots of people sitting in rocking chairs because they have no choice. That's where they are physically and mentally. But as long as you can produce, I think you ought to be at it. And I think that keeps you healthy and young.
Are your employees receptive to the continual learning? Do you hire for that? Or have
Yes.
they gotten used to it?
Yeah. I mean, we have people here that were actually working for Progressive Stamping where we bought them, and they're still here. Um, so, but I think, and the reason they're still here is because they're people who want to learn. Those people who didn't want to learn probably left us voluntarily. Um, yeah. Again, we just always there's always some sort of training going on, one way or another, um, and or even if they're refresher courses. Um, we have everybody go through OSHA training. It's online. Everybody every year has to go through OSHA training about safety and how to be safe and all that kind of thing. And everybody has to do it. Even me, I have to do it every year.
Well, and I was going to say that your continual process improvement helps improve your safety record, right? And I think on your manufacturing side, you're dealing in such exact numbers that continually improving the processes and procedures helps improve the product and the services that you're offering to the clients, right?
Yeah, it's always amazing to me. You think you've got everything about as slick as you can get it. You can't cut any more waste out of the system. And then somebody goes, "What about this?" And you go, "Oh yeah, we could do that too." So the idea is to get everybody involved. Now, I wish we had more people saying, "Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that?" But we have a lot of that, and we the last 2 years have not been very good about that because up until this year, the previous 2 years, it was about survival because business got so bad because of COVID. Many of our customers on the flexibility concept side were shut down. The jobs were just shut down. Nobody was buying anything, and so it was pretty rough. Same thing on the progressive side. But we're getting back to that now, and committed. You have to be. You just have to be, or the world's going to pass you by. So just out of necessity, you have to keep trying to get better.
Yeah, I agree. Now, we have talked a little bit about, well, we've talked a lot about progressive stamping and flexibility concepts. Flexibility Concepts acquired Progressive Stamping at some point. Talk to me about that acquisition, what it was like, why you did it, what it's like to own two businesses instead of just one. There are a number of questions wrapped up in there, but let's talk a little bit about that process and what happened and what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I mean, how it started literally is the owner called me up of Progressive Stamping and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling. Are you guys interested?" And I said, "Well, I think so." So it was a long, drawn out conversation, a long process, and a lot of negotiations, as you can imagine, going back and forth. The the criteria going through it is the big issue is how are we, because when we started seeing the financials, it got a little scary because they were in trouble financially, and um, and part of that is because their product mix has changed. They had an in-house product that went away. Their main customer for that product took the work overseas, and so that was a big blow to their business. And so we're thinking, well, how are we going to make it more successful? And how are we going to fix all that? And so it forced us to go through what are we bringing to Progressive that will make a difference. And circling back to what we just talked about, one of the things that hit me when I looked at their and again, they've been one of our suppliers for almost 5 years. Well, actually for 4 years, not quite 5 years. And so we knew them fairly well, and they were nice people. They were good people, but it always seemed disorganized. It always seemed, things didn't seem to run smoothly. They had a hard time keeping their commitments as far as deliveries, and they were cash strapped. Uh, so that made it hard. When you don't have any money, you don't have any flexibility to. Sorry for the pun, but you don't have any ability to. It narrows what you can do. So we we knew we had some money that we could throw at it, but what I really felt and what some of and Mark felt was they needed shoring up in their management and they needed shoring up in their training. That people were not being trained and continually trained, and they weren't getting raises because they didn't have any money. So we felt pretty confident that if we brought and they were in a different location than we were. So for the first year and a half, almost 2 years, I spent 2 days at one place and 3 days at the other. I just flopped that back and forth, and Mark did the same thing. We were the operational people. I mean, it's always been that way. And so, boy, we weren't there 2 days, and he and I got together and said, yeah, it's a management issue. The gentleman who's still with us, that was the general manager, he was a tool maker. And the owner came in one day and said, I need a new general manager, and you're it. And then gave him the keys and walked away. Well, I mean, good grief. It's like taking somebody you can't just take somebody and say, here, by the way, here's a press and there's a start button. Go at it. Have a good day. And make sure you make good parts. We do that to people. And I learned in the restaurant business that, we had a training program, but it wasn't effective enough. We had to bring people on slower. We had to have somebody with them because they got afraid, they got alone, they ran into situations constantly they didn't know how to handle. They needed a buddy to talk to. So we found out by extending the time that they worked together that they actually created a relationship. So they had somebody to go talk to when they were a new employee. They weren't just working with a bunch of strangers, and they stayed longer. And once you got them past that second or third month, then they tended to stay longer. I cut my retention rate in half in a matter of about 9, 10, 12 months. So we applied the same thing at Progressive, similar, it's just a different situation, but a similar thing. And again, once we started saying, hey, no, listen, guys, these are the standards we have to meet. We got to be doing this. We got to be doing that. Well, we had people quit because they didn't want to meet those expectations, which actually had the benefit of right sizing the company because they were overstaffed. Even though we were bringing them new work, they were overstaffed. And the first thing we did was fire their largest customer.
Oh.
Because I did an analysis and realized they were losing money on that customer. Every time they shipped them something, they were losing money on it. So we told the customer there would either be a price increase or we were going to terminate them. And so we fired them, which was a bit of a risky move, but at the same time, sometimes you stay in business for the people you don't keep. And,
so that's another fascinating topic. I have always said being able to fire a client is a luxury. And you were talking about cash flow earlier, and if you don't have the cash to do it, it is a risk. It can be very, very scary, but it can be one of the best things that you do. And it is hard as a business owner to fire a client or a customer, particularly if it's one of your largest.
Yeah, and I think that's we knew we were bringing work to the company. We were going to take work that we're having done by other manufacturers. We had 2 other manufacturers. We pulled all that work into Progressive, so we brought extra work to Progressive, and so we knew while it would have been nice to hang on to the other piece of business because we had the staffing for it and we had the equipment for it, and we ran 2 shifts for that first year to do that, but we realized that we were not going to make money on that customer, and they were a monster to deal with. And so it was they were just very difficult to deal with, and So we made that decision, but it was easier to make that decision knowing we were automatically bringing more business to the company. And there were some people we were fine with if they left. So so it helped us, it wasn't too terrifying, but yeah. It,
Well, and we'll talk about peer groups here in a little bit, but Dave and I have been in a peer group together for a long time, and we talk a lot about culture and how culture can weed out
yes.
people and clients, but people that you don't want. And you referenced, a minute ago that you set some expectations and you said some stuff and people left. It can be hard to lose employees, particularly if you think they're key employees. But sometimes, like losing a bad client, that can be one of the best things that happens to you. But I think that's another challenge small business owners have. And
Yeah, I think it is. You have I hung on to people too long? Absolutely. I don't. I hire slowly and I fire slowly. Um, there's probably some exceptions to that, but rarely. But and it's the same. I always want to believe the best in people, and I always want to believe the best in our potential customers. And although I know that many of them won't live up to the same standard that I think that we ought to have. But the try not to get too long story. I had an employee when I was in the restaurant business. This is one of those lessons I learned the hard way. I had a young lady that worked for me. She was shy when she went to work for us. She's a pretty good waitress. I said, I'd like to train you to be a cashier. I think you'd be reliable and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "Oh, I'm terrified of that. I'm not good with numbers." And I said, "You know what? We're going to try it. You're going to do it." Well, she became a terrific cashier, and she had a good relationship with. She was one of our, we call them day ladies. They work the day shift. Well, our lunch crowd tends to be a lot more repeat business, and so customers get to know the wait staff, and the wait staff is almost always the same people. It's not like on Saturday nights where you have a lot of people and there's a lot more. So in that sense, so she got to know a lot of customers, and she became my lead on. She was in charge of opening the floor Monday through Friday. And so I really leaned on her. I thought the world of her. I thought she was a great employee. And um, something came up. I was getting hints from people that things were not as I perceived them to be. And then finally I discovered that she had a real problem. And I'm not going to discuss that, but she had a real problem, and I had to let her go. And she begged and cried and said, "How can you let me go?" and all this kind of stuff. And I told her, I said, "What you did is I can't forgive it. I can forgive it, but I can't keep you as an employee." "Well, I'll change my ways and I'll do all this stuff." I said, "No, I'm sorry. You can come and see me anytime you want to. I'll be happy to talk to you, all that kind of thing, but you can't work anymore." Well, after she left, I started to notice that some of the squabbles, and drama that happened within, again, a place with 50 people working, um, that some of that drama started to go away. And then I started thinking about when things went wrong or when somebody came to me and complained about something was happened, if I traced that back, she was at the center of it too many times. She wasn't the person who did it, but she had something to do with starting the gossip, or starting this story or starting that story or spreading things that weren't quite accurate, which created distrust among the crew and created drama. So it dawned on me that sometimes even your key people, um, they're the ones that are tearing your organization apart, but you don't know it because it's hidden from you, and nobody really wants to tell you when you're at the top. They tell you what you want to hear. They don't want to be a tattletale, but they also don't want to tell you something that they think is going to make you mad or make you question whether they know it, because they know she's one of your favorites. And so I tucked that one away, and I started looking for when I had people, no matter how good they were, if they were stirring the pot. I found it was because they were ruining everybody else. They were staying, and all the other good ones were leaving because they didn't want to work in that environment. And so, especially if they were in leadership positions.
That reminds me of the story that I went to pick my son. It was my daughter, actually, I think, up from daycare one day. And there were these kids running around in a circle, and they were being kind of loud and rowdy and chanting something and just in a circle. And I walked in, and the preschool teacher just looked at me, and she smiled at me, and she went over and she said, "Hey, little Johnny, will you come over here and help me with this?" And he did, and he went, and then the whole circle just disbanded, and all the kids went back to working quietly and doing whatever they were doing. And she just looked at me and she said, "I learned a long time ago, if you remove the ringleader, it'll all go away." And
Yeah.
I've applied that to so many things in life. If you just remove the ringleader, and she did it so nicely. She didn't even get mad at little Johnny. She just redirect, in preschool it's redirecting. But, in your case, obviously you had to do a little bit more. You had to fire, but,
Yeah. Yeah. So that applies to customers. You have a customer that's causing constant disruption with your production because they have emergency orders all the time. There's always a problem. They don't pay when they're supposed to. You find yourself doing all this nursing, and you have to do some. I mean, you can't be a management. I had a manager tell me one time. He says, I'm tired of all this babysitting." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "These people bring their personal problems to work." Well, of course they do. I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily you have to deal with them, but all that stuff at home comes to work, and all the stuff at work goes home. And so you have to understand that if you can help them, and one of the things I try to teach and still try to teach and try to remind myself, if you can teach people how to problem solve their personal problems, they may become better at problem solving at work.
Yeah.
Because it's the same basic techniques. You use the same criteria. So teaching people how to problem solve, teaching people how to learn, and how to apply that learning, you're making them better people. And so you get a better employee, and you make them a better person. And
Yeah.
pretty soon they're affecting people around them too, the right
Yeah.
way, not the wrong way. So
And
you got to remove those bad eggs.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done. I talk too much.
No, you don't. I just was going to say that just really goes to continual process improvement and training all the time. And that's, for me, where the joy of being a business owner comes in, is making things better.
Yeah.
Well, processes improve, service, clients, all that. So, okay, so let's go to, you've mentioned partners. I think you have 5 partners, but really only 3 active. Partnership issues can be a big deal for business owners. So talk to me about how you manage your relationship with your partners.
Um, Obviously, we all had different. I mean, in the beginning, it was all, oh, this is wonderful, this is wonderful, and of course, then the problem started hitting, and how to solve those issues. And so one of the things we did is we divided up responsibilities, that people had certain responsibilities they were totally responsible for taking care of, and nobody would not that people wouldn't interfere, but people, that was their business. They were supposed to run that. And if there was issues, then you sat down and you all talked about it. But so we kind of divided up the responsibilities, so we weren't all doing the same thing. Now, one of the things we did do is everybody was treated equally as far as an owner, which is what I mean by that is that everybody had the same right to make a decision about everything. And so lots of times we make group decisions on things, whereas a more pyramid company would that's their job, and you leave them alone. Now over time it evolved to that, because we got big enough and had enough employees that you just couldn't do everything. You couldn't manage all the people. You didn't have those overlaps. We had to start breaking things apart, and so that became more the natural way, and it kind of naturally went that way. And then when 2 people kind of dropped out of the business, they wanted to retire. That really cleared that up. But the other thing that I think that we did is I believe in nobody's ever right all the time. Unfortunately, that includes me. So, in spite of the fact that lots of times I think I'm always right, I realize that not everybody else is always right. So there's a good chance maybe I'm not either. And so we've tried to apply that as a company to the partners. And so if there really was 1 or 2 people, there's 5 of us, if there's 1 or 2 people that were really strongly against something, and we couldn't resolve we couldn't fix or solve to the point where they're not against something, then we just didn't do it. In spite of the fact that I may have thought it was a wonderful idea, but if they didn't, we just didn't do it. So that was the way it was for one of us. One of us could have a real strong opinion, or even two could have a strong opinion. But if we couldn't at least get people to a neutral stance, and I can remember votes where people say, I really don't think we should do this, but if you guys think this will work, I'll vote for it. If we got to that point, that was okay. But if somebody was just dead set against it, even if it was 4-1 and I knew it would carry, we didn't have that vote until somebody said, "Yeah, okay, let's go okay with it." And it was that way when we bought Progressive. I mean, in the beginning, it was 2 of us wanted to buy it, 3 of us didn't, and it gradually got to 4 of us wanted to buy it, and 1 of us didn't. But even that one went to, well, if you guys got a plan for managing this and you think you can turn it around, I'm in. I won't fight you on it. And that's what you had to get. We had to at least get to that. But if there was strong disagreement, we just didn't do it. We dropped it. Did we miss opportunities because of that? Probably. Do we miss making mistakes because of that? Definitely. Sometimes that one person or 2 people, they saw something that the other of us didn't see.
Have you ever been one of the ones that said no? I can't get comfortable, and how did that work out?
Yeah, let me think. Yeah, there have been times I was the one on the outside. Um, didn't happen very often because usually it evolved to that I was the one. This actually started before we even started making product. I was the one that started running the meetings. So therefore I created the agenda. So now what would happen? I created the agenda. But people could certainly add to it or bring in things to talk about. But the other part of that was so lots of time I was the one that was putting new ideas on the table because I was the one that ran the meetings. Um, but there were times where we had issues like a personnel problem that maybe more people wanted to be involved in, or how do we want to handle this, or how do we want to do that. Um, and um, and there were times that I was the person who said, no, I don't think we should do that. And usually we would just I don't remember a situation. Well, I do remember one situation. There was one situation where I was the only no vote, and they proceeded with a vote, and I said, guys, if you do this, I will not participate. And it was something outside the organization, but there was something they wanted to change, and I told them I said I'm completely against the way we're doing this, and they overruled me, and they did it. Um, the fact of the matter is, 6 months later, they were right. Um, I didn't. I still don't. I'm still uncomfortable with the way that we did it, but it was the right decision. And so there you
That's
go.
interesting. So, I think it's interesting. I find it fascinating how you continually are able to refer back to the restaurant business. I think, even from my perspective, I would not have thought there was so much similarity in restaurant business and manufacturing. So, can you talk a little bit about how those are similar, how you can keep applying all the stuff that you learned in the restaurant business to this new manufacturing business?
Um,
It's
yeah.
not new now, but
Well, no, no. Well, again, I think the general answer to that is I cut my teeth in management in the restaurant business. I was in the restaurant business for 25 years. So although I've been in the flexibility concepts business for 27 years, and so the foundations of a lot of the things I believe were established while I was learning my lessons in management and restaurant business. And but that's most of that has gone to a whole nother level. So I can trace I can actually give you examples of where here at Progressive Flexibility Concepts where we removed an employee that was a troublemaker. But I learned that lesson way back in my early 30s um, in a restaurant. So I don't use the reference of, I learned that, so here I applied it. Now there are things that I've learned. There's things I've learned about marketing and sales I didn't know before. There's things that I've learned about finance. I did, I actually took a tutoring class in finance. that was 10 weeks long. It was one morning a week. I'd meet him at 6 o'clock in the morning at the office, and we'd work for 2 hours, and I had homework, but because I realized I needed to get better at how I handle finances and understand more about how do you leverage loans and when don't you do a loan and when do you do a loan and how do we build equity and all that kind of stuff. So I actually took the course uh, to do that, and so there's been lots of things I've learned but that basic idea of process and of treating your people right and having the basics of what we do here, at least how I manage and how I do these things, and how I learned a lot about people. And again, in the restaurant business, good grief, these 85% of the employees were probably under the age of 18.
Yeah.
So it was, again, you were cutting your teeth with.
Yeah.
The big mistake I made there, by the way, is I went home and tried to manage my children the same way I tried to manage my employees.
Didn't work.
No, my wife kept trying to tell me you're screwing it up. You need to fix this. I finally did, sort of, but that was hard for me to change.
Yeah.
But I think that's why the restaurant business comes up so much, because that's where I cut my teeth.
Well, I mean, you've shared with me offline in the restaurant business. So you're making parts now. They need to be the same. You have specs that you have to meet every single day, it goes down to the most minute measurements. But in the restaurant business, and I didn't even really think about this, but you go to a restaurant because you like the food there, and you have to make the food, and it has to taste the same every single time you make that same recipe. I mean, I cook for my family. I'm pretty sure it doesn't always taste the same. I'm not that exact. So I think there are some similarities there. You are manufacturing food in a restaurant versus, and that was not something I had really thought of.
Yeah, it's the base. Yeah, it's the same thing. So in a management role, it's exactly the same thing. And the P&L is a P&L, and so is a balance sheet. So and then now the one thing I didn't, my last job in the restaurant business, I did make some fixed asset decisions, um, and I started making some in the previous the job just before that, and I did some stuff with marketing, um, but that really fell on my shoulders here. So that really grew, but I got that foundation, uh, from when I was in the restaurant business. But here, like I said, I took a class. I realized I was inadequate in the role.
Yeah.
I needed to take tutoring.
Well, and that goes to kind of my next question, which we've talked about in some of our other interviews, which is imposter syndrome, right? Lots of business owners deal with that. I have personally. So, and I think you touched on that when you kind of said, I realized I needed to learn something. So I went and took a class, which also goes to something I know you're passionate about, which is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So talk about maybe imposter syndrome, if you've ever dealt with it, what you have done to overcome that.
um, yeah, I realize I'm not an imposter, but I also realize that lots of people think I know things I don't know, and they have expectations of me I'm not so sure I can meet. So I do in some ways believe about faking it until you make it. For example, you calling me up and saying, "Hey, I'd like you." I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I just never thought of it that way. It's just something evolved. It just this is what happened. So I've never referred to myself as an entrepreneur until you did. So you've ruined my life. But anyway, so I think for me, there's always been a certain amount uh, of of unworthiness, and I've been fortunate. Yet I also know that I've I've worked very hard at trying to learn, try to do the right thing, even when it's hard to do the right thing. Uh, I have said to some of my business associates, not my partners, but people related to the business, they're saying, "Well, I don't understand why you're doing that. This is the real world. You got to do this." And I said, "No, that's against my principles to do that. I don't believe in doing those kinds of things." And he said, well, they're screwing you. You should screw them back. I said, no, that's not how I operate. And they said, well, we just don't get it. You're not going to survive in the world if that's the way you think. It's, it's dog eat dog eat out there, and you got dog eat. Did I say dog eat? I think I said dog eat. It's dog eat dog out there, and you got to you got to fight for that. And I said, well, I'll fight, but I'll fight a different way. It doesn't mean I'm going to allow them to continue to take advantage of me, but again, you have to stick to your principles. So I think for me, I have a great deal of comfort of who I am and why I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. And this all goes back without getting, I don't want to get turned into a religious service, but this all goes back to my faith and what drives me as far as what I think is important in life. But and you have to stay true to that. So the imposter syndrome, I know I'm not all that great. And I know there's lots of things I could have done better. But I also know that I'm always trying to do better. And that's what's more important than, because you never arrive. I heard a speaker about 3 years ago. I thought, my goodness, gentlemen. And it was all about how he'd figured everything all out. And I thought, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. If you figured everything all out, you're already gone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no hope for you.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where he ended up, but I doubt that he's even employed now. But I learned that a long, long time ago. So I never see that I've done anything that great, but I also realize that there's lots of things I just don't know how to do, and I go find out how to do them, or find somebody who can do them for me.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk about, we talked about the peer group that we were involved in. Talk about, actually, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about your work with schools and the Alliance Workforce Committee to develop the 8 high demand career pathways. And you're passionate about education and training the next generation workforce. So let's talk about that.
Holy cow. You picked a nice little tiny topic right at the end.
I know. I share your passion, though, and I love the work you're doing. So let's finish on that note.
Yeah. So, well, again, we talked about continuous improvement and training and all that kind of stuff. And I describe myself, back to our imposter question. I'm a slow learner. It's taken me years to get where I am. I've met young. I had coffee last Tuesday with somebody that's 32 years old, and I'm thinking, when I was 32 years old, I didn't have that wisdom. I didn't get that wisdom until I was 55. I mean, they're way ahead of me, and I'm sure there's probably some things where they're not, but that's the way life is. But it's always extraordinary to meet younger people that I thought, golly, just proof once again, I'm a slow learner. And I always describe myself as a plodder. But but I see young people here working for us, and young people that they just need some mentoring, and they need some coaching, mentoring more than coaching. And I enjoy, one of the things you do in management, especially since I started out working with, one of the reasons, by the way, I left the restaurant business, is I had a very difficult time. It was getting harder and harder to relate to a 16-year-old. By the time I left the restaurant business, my kids were in their 30s. I screwed them up when they were kids. So, what makes you think I can work with kids now? But anyway, so and again, we were trying to get new employees. Well, every time we hired somebody that was kind of fresh and new and young, they hardly ever lasted. They just didn't seem to have the right skill set, not necessarily technical skills, but soft skills, the ability to get along with people. And so, so we have like 3 generations working here. We got people in their 20s, and we got people in their 60s, and one of them in their 70s. We won't mention who he is. But anyway, so it just became kind of a thing for me. I always was willing to help anybody, share knowledge, experience, help mentor them through difficult times in their life. So that it just was natural for me that when somebody said, "Hey, you want to come to an advisory board meeting?" I said, "Well, sure. I don't really think I'm interested, but I'll go, just because." And in fact, that was Gunnar Hood. And some of you know Gunnar Hood. But anyway, so I went and I was hooked. Now we met with, so it was just there was such a huge gap in that need. I thought, I can do something here. In fact, I went to my advisory board meeting Tuesday night, 2 nights ago. So at Capitol Hill High School. And it also has changed my perspective. I've started to understand that some young people, I've talked to kids about hiring them and having them come to work here. And I realized that for the last 2 years, they've been couch surfing. They don't stay in the same home for more than a week or two. They just bounce around. They've done that for the last 2 years of high school. And I'm thinking, my gosh, what happened? Well, their mother got remarried and the stepfather can't stand them and they left. And I'm thinking, if that happened to me, I don't know where I would have ended up at. And so, I have way too many kids like that. And so, again, anything we can do to help with that. And of course, manufacturing has a poor image in this country in a lot of ways. And there's huge opportunities for employment. And but people don't think of working in manufacturing. So that's the other thing is I love manufacturing, even though restaurant business was like manufacturing. I love taking something, raw ingredients, and turning out and say, you know what, we made that. That feels great to me. So I want more people who enjoy that kind of thing to be involved and have opportunities. So you mesh those two ideas together, you end up with this passion for talking to young people and working with young people and exposing young people to opportunities in manufacturing. And when I said to the two school teachers sitting on either side of me that were career teachers, wonderful ladies, and they were talking about, everybody has to go to college or they won't have a successful career. And I said, I don't know exactly how much you make, but my tool makers make $55,000 a year. And they went, that's more than we make. And I said, I know. So don't say. And I said, they barely got out of high school, but they became a machinist, then they became a tool maker. And it was a 10-year process. You have to respect that. And they deserve to make a good living, and they can make a good living. There are good jobs out there without going to college. No, I went to college. I believe in college. But I also believe for some people that's a horrible place to go. So trying to grab those people that's the wrong place to and steer them into a manufacturer that will teach them on the job how to do the job, how to learn. But also we have to mentor them. We have to, like I said, back in the restaurant business, you couldn't take them out and 2 days they're running a job. You've got to bring them on slowly, and that comes to the career pathways so that people see these 8 career pathways that we developed. For example, one of them is a machinist. But they could start out as an assembler, then they learn how to run a machine. Then you can run a machine, but that doesn't make you a machinist. You're a machinist when you know how to program that machine. And then when you can teach somebody else how to do that. And then maybe they step into a leadership role, or maybe they learn something more technical. They become a programmer, that kind of thing. So we created these pathways and all the things they have to learn along the way, and what are the resources to do that. And I've shared those with Capitol Hill. So that ties into the ICAP program that they also do in the schools, where in 8th grade they start exposing young people to different career paths. And we're running out of time, so I'll shut up.
No, I should have started that earlier because I'm so passionate about that. You said college is a horrible option for some kids. For so many more, it's just not even a reality. It's not even an option.
Not even a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
think that's
one
thing about manufacturers. A lot of manufacturers will pay for your education, not necessarily a full year, but they'll send you classes and they'll train you. So you end up without all the debt. And anyway.
But still, I guess the point I was trying to make is a lot of those kids don't know they have other options.
Correct.
And so I love that you're out there trying to show them that they do and create opportunities and pathways, as you called them, to show them that they do. They can have a future debt free, right? I mean, the problem with college these days is kids come out of school with debt, and then they get married, and that kid has debt, and then they buy a car, a couple cars, and a house, and I mean, you're strapped with debt, and it's a tough way to start out of college. So anyway, we could go on for this. I could go on this topic for hours, but thank you very much. Thanks to Dave for joining us. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, it was fun. I love talking about this kind of stuff. If you'd like to learn more about Dave or his companies, FlexiTrack or Progressive Stamping, you can visit their website at flexibilityconcepts.com, or you can connect with Dave on LinkedIn. And for more information about Optimize Marketing, visit our website at www.optimize.marketing, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So thank you, Dave. It was wonderful, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.